This week's assignment was to read chapters 2 and 3 of The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. These chapters focus on this idea of plasticity, which, as described by Alvaro Pascual-Leon, is the normal ongoing state of the nervous system throughout the lifespan. So when I first saw the word plasticity, it kind of gave me the notion that the brain was this rigid object and that it couldn't be changed. But really, it's saying that the brain is constantly changed, and it is due to the experiences and behaviors that we experience on a daily basis. So there have been different researchers throughout history that have done tests on the brain to figure out how it functions, and there's one by Merzamik. He began monkey trials, and what he actually did was slit the sensory nerve. He wanted to know what would happen whenever this nerve grew back. Would it grow the way it was before, or would it grow differently? So, as he kind of expected, the nerves grew back in a haphazard way. And what happened in response to this is that whenever he would touch the lower joint on the finger, the monkey's brain would actually say that it was the top. So what happened was the sensory portion of the brain was registering the feelings differently in different places due to the fact that the nerves didn't grow back as perfect. Another experiment was done by Eric Kandel that this book talks to about, which he did on sea slugs. What he did was he would touch the gill, and what he found was if he touched the gill once, the sea slug would retract it and give a response to the touch. But if he just constantly touched it, say 40 times, the book said that rather than 90% of the sensory feeling the touches, it would be reduced almost down to 10%. So what was happening is the sea slug was getting more acclimated to the touches, and so the responses were lessened. The book also talks about how the great philosophers Aristotle and Descartes viewed the brain. Aristotle, who we all think of, he's a great philosopher. He'd made lots of advances, but in respect to how he viewed the brain, he actually saw it as only for regulating temperature. He basically said that the brain is to make sure we don't overheat and die. And he said that humans have a large brain because of the blood supply. We have more blood than other animals, smaller animals, therefore we need a bigger brain. Descartes was more online with what we know of the brain functions today, and he said that it was part of an elaborate machine. He basically put it in line with the heart and the lungs and that they all have a function of our body, but he didn't really understand how it worked. Now, with the use of technology, microscopes, experiments, we realize that the brain has such a big deal and plays such a big role in sensory and responses to our behaviors. This book is similar to what we learned in reading War and Peace on My iPhone because both of them compare our knowledge today to knowledge before and how it has changed due to technology. Say, in reading War and Peace of Our iPhone, it talks about how many scholars would say not to read it on your iPhone because it's an old book, classic book, you need to read it in its original form. Whereas the reader or the writer of War and Peace on My iPhone decided that wasn't the case. Also, this book constantly talks about how technology has changed us so much in that it can actually change how we think. It can change the way our brain functions. There's a quote by Jeffrey Schwartz, or an idea called Survival of the Busiest, which I thought it was really interesting because we're all so busy, and it's basically saying that the busier you are, the more you're doing, the more your brain is going to be apt to learn to these responses. If you don't exercise your brain as much, you're going to have less less responses to activities, which is true because learning increases such brain activity. So it's all just summing up the fact that whenever we exercise our brain, it really is changing it rather than simply keeping it the same.